We'll jump into today's episode right after this announcement. For over 13 years, something remarkable has been happening. Rural hospitals and other small healthcare organizations that have partnered with Capstone have been achieving results and forming workplace cultures that even we are blown away by. It is truly a game changer when rural hospitals are the provider of choice and employer of choice so they can keep care local and margins strong. Far more healthcare organizations need to experience what's possible. That's why we're stepping forward in a bigger way, expanding our team of experts, expanding our capabilities by adding a strategic planning division to expand our ability to help even more rural hospitals and other healthcare organizations in 2026 and beyond. Capstone will continue to be the partner that small healthcare organizations can count on to meet them where they're at and guide them towards a stronger future. You can learn more at capstoneleadership.net. I experienced it myself, and I have watched leader after leader, probably thousands of them now, get to the other side, and they can't even remember doing it the old way. They can't remember, hardly the chaos and the frustration that they felt because now they're in a different place in what they do each day as a leader and how that feels and the results they're able to get as a leader. So that is one of the game changers, in my view, over 30 plus years of experience in healthcare and especially rural health specifically, as what reduces turnover and burnout in leaders in healthcare.
Welcome to Culture Change RX, the podcast for healthcare professionals that are committed to creating a thriving workplace culture, improving the experiences of employees and patients, and ultimately unlocking their organization's next level of potential. I'm Sue Tetzlaff, your host and co-founder of Capstone Leadership Solutions. Join me and my insightful guests each week as we share actionable insights for navigating the crucial people side of the business of healthcare. Subscribe now for a weekly dose of Culture Change RX. Now let's dive into this week's conversation where culture change takes center stage.
Welcome to another episode of Culture Change RX. It is me, Sue Tetzlaff, the co-founder of Capstone Leadership Solutions and the host of Culture Change RX. Today is one of those solo episodes where I don't have a guest today in the studio, so it's just me here with you today. And I want to talk about something that sparked, my brain going when I read it on a LinkedIn post. It was a post about burnout in leadership. So, in particular, middle managers was seemingly the focus, and that the answer to improving the turnover, decreasing the burnout of leaders in healthcare is that we need to decrease their workload and their effort. And that was the whole idea and the kind of the appeal that was being made through this post on LinkedIn, that we need to decrease the workload and effort of leaders if we want to decrease turnover and burnout. And my brain went somewhere else. It did not go to decreasing their workload and effort. My brain went a different place, not because necessarily I just kind of thought differently than this person, but it has been my experience for more than 22 years as a healthcare leader myself in a community hospital. A lot of that time I was a senior leader, so I was a leader of leaders. So I was leading, mentoring, and coaching middle managers for years. And so, of course, I would be concerned as their leader about their workload, their effort, their turnover, and their burnout, right? So it's something that was near and dear to my heart. And I had lots of experience with, evaluating and overcoming scenarios where that was a concern. And as well, for the last 14 years in our work with Capstone Leadership Solutions, we've worked with thousands of leaders, but in particular, when we work with most of them, we're working with them as an entire leadership team. So not individually with leaders, but with the entire leadership team. So we get to evaluate and watch the transformation, not just of organizations, but of entire leadership teams, which is a makeup of all of these individual leaders that are serving there in these leadership roles in primarily small and rural healthcare organizations. Again, that is primarily where we work. So, getting back to this LinkedIn post that, we need to decrease turnover and burnout in healthcare leaders. And to do that, we need to decrease their workload and effort. And what I see differently and what I think differently after all of my experience as a leader and with all of the leaders that either I've helped support through our work at Capstone or as a leader of leaders in my community hospital role is that leaders get, in a position of wanting to leave their roles, jump ship out of leadership, of feeling stressed, maybe on that higher end that might be deemed burnout. They get there not necessarily because they're putting in too much effort or their workload is too great necessarily. It's that if their workload and effort feel great and it isn't being met with improved outcomes, that disconnect is very frustrating, right? That's what becomes extremely stressful. If I'm going to work this hard, if I'm going to put in this much effort, if I'm going to carry this much load, I want to see something good on the other side of it. I want to see improvement. I want there to be a positive work environment. I want there to be great results for patients. If I'm a clinical leader, I want there to be good outcomes in AR days if I'm a revenue cycle leader, right? So the workload and the effort itself isn't necessarily the big issue or complaint. It's if that way of working and that load that's being carried and that effort that's being put in isn't connected to positive results that are meaningful to that leader, are exciting and motivating that leader to show up for another day, another week, another month, another quarter, another year, right? That they'll raise their hand and say, yeah, I'm still in it. I'm not going anywhere. And actually, I'm not burnout from all this effort and work. I'm actually energized and excited and proud of the work outcomes that we are creating. So the answer in my eyes is not decreasing necessarily their workload or their effort. That's not their biggest concern. It's really not. The real issue or concern to be solved to decrease turnover and burnout is to help leaders for whatever effort they put in, whatever work they do, whatever load they carry, that they're able to do that in such a way that there's great results, there's improvement, there's growth on the other side of that effort that they're putting in, of that workload that they are carrying. So, what are some of the ways that we know that organizations, and even mine did this, my organization worked for many years under the scenario of us carrying these heavy workloads, working hard, long, carrying a lot, giving a lot of effort, yet our results kept declining, right? Year after year, things were moving in the wrong direction. And there was a point in our organization's history where we said, we got to stop the madness, right? We have got to stop the madness. We have to figure out what is the new way of working? What is the new way of this is how we lead around here? How can our leaders lead in new, better ways that actually change the results on the other side so that they turn around and that they are positive, right? So for every hour of effort, every day of effort, which leaders are going to give, right? They're going to give that effort. They're going to carry that load for that work day, that work week, that while they're doing that, they know how to do it in such a way that there's great results, positive results, progress on the other side of that work. So where my mind goes with this is exactly what I know my organization did and what now Capstone helps other organizations be able to do through one of the 4 systems that's part of our approach to helping organizations move on a trajectory of good to great, great to even greater, is that one of the 4 systems that helps an entire organization always keep getting better, always growing, always improving, moving maybe from a fragile, unhealthy state of an organization to one that is, really maybe described as organizational vitality. To do that, one of the systems is the leadership system. So what is our system or our model for leading and then developing and supporting and coaching our leaders to lead in these new, better ways that get better results and keep progress moving in a positive direction. So it's not really about adding workload or effort. It's about what are we doing as leaders as we're carrying that workload, and what is that effort? What are those things we're actually doing? And in our work, we call that model of leadership the 9 core leadership practices, or something we call the leadership bundle. So it's a model of leadership that all leaders can adopt in the organization. Actually, a single leader could adopt this model of leadership, even if their entire organization doesn't adopt it. But obviously, there's synergy for the entire organization if all leaders lead in a very similar way, that there's not variation across how leaders lead, and that we have an adopted model that we know will make sure that the workload that our leaders are carrying and the effort that they're giving is met with progress, is met with results on the other side of that. And that is what decreases turnover and burnout. So changing the way they lead, not adding more to their plate in workload or effort, but taking that current workload and effort and changing how they approach it. And it becomes a new way of leading. What are the things that leaders do daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually, semi-annually, or whatever it is, that it's a new way of leading. So it's not decreasing their workload and effort. It's changing the way they lead. So it's more proactive versus reactive. It gets them out of that whirlwind or chaos of reacting, firefighting. Some of that will always have to be done, but that isn't the work that leads to long-term improvement and progress. It gets us through the day, right? It firefights the issue of the day, but it isn't overall going to be the type of work that calms down the whirlwind, makes things better for the future, so that leaders don't always have to be in that firefighting reactive mode. That is exhausting. That is frustrating. And again, that kind of work and effort isn't what gets leaders to a place of feeling satisfied in their work. They came to leadership to make a difference, to make something better for the future. And it just doesn't seem like, however hard they work, whatever effort they put in isn't leading to that. So basically just switching, this is how we used to lead, to this is our new way of leading. And all of a sudden, when they get to the other side of that, there's a learning curve, right? But when they get to the other side of that, it is like night and day. I experienced it myself, and I have watched leader after leader, probably thousands of them now, get to the other side, and they can't even remember doing it the old way. They can't remember, hardly the chaos and the frustration that they felt, because now they're in a different place in what they do each day as a leader and how that feels and the results they're able to get as a leader. So that is one of the game changers in my view, over 30 plus years of experience in healthcare and especially rural health specifically, as what reduces turnover and burnout in leaders in healthcare. So changing how they work, not necessarily their workload or their effort. And then another thing I want to offer up here today is related to what they're focusing their work on. So first I talked about how they worked, which is the 9 core leadership practices or the leadership bundle. So it's how they do their work. But really, we also have to talk about what they're focused on in their work. And years ago, we did a study or an evaluation. We had a whole large group of healthcare leaders, from charge nurses to middle managers to vice presidents to CEOs. We had a method for them to evaluate how they were spending their time and what they were focusing their time on. So, what we found was that these leaders had about 2 hours a week or 100 hours a year to really focus on the things that make something better for the future, which is why they came to leadership. They wanted to make something better for the future. But now they found that they spent so much time in the whirlwind, firefighting, reacting to day-to-day operational issues that they really only had about 2 hours a week, 100 hours a year to focus on those things that make something better for the future. And on average, they had 27 things that were goals or improvement aims that they were engaged in their work to accomplish in those 2 hours a week, 100 hours a year. So you can imagine that feels like an awful workload and very little ability to focus on those big priorities or those improvement priorities. They felt frustrated, but they also felt like they were failures. Like, why can't I do this? Right. And they also felt scattered. They had 27 different things and maybe 2 hours a week where they were trying to focus on them. And so they felt really scattered in their efforts, and they were scattering their energy and their focus across so many things. And if anything, at best, they were, maybe making millimeters of progress towards many things. And that just didn't feel satisfying. So it was unsatisfying. It felt like their efforts were scattered and that they were, of course, maybe feeling like failures and even overwhelmed by that. So, really, when we change the way we work, that also needs to be paired with changing what we work on, and in particular, narrowing the focus of what we're working on. So, there is actually research about this, that the more improvement focuses you have as an individual leader, especially if you're a middle manager close to day-to-day operations, where you are going to have to manage schedules and payroll and people and, the day-to-day issues that are going to pop up with that. Pausing here to get healthcare executives excited about Capstone's 14th annual Healthcare Executive Forum. Many small and rural healthcare organizations are operating under conditions that naturally strain margins, workforce stability, and long-term competitiveness. Strength today requires more than perseverance. It requires intentional design and doing. And that's why the focus of our Healthcare Executive Forum this year is on designing the future. It's all about where strategic clarity meets execution certainty. This isn't just another conference or networking event. This is where rural healthcare executives learn how to lead their organizations to true organizational vitality. If your plan or your ability to execute it is in question, if progress feels incremental instead of transformational, it may be time for a trajectory changing strategic period. Be a leader in rural healthcare's new era, the era of organizational vitality. Register now and bring your executive team. It is true that the next 3 years may be the most defining period your organization has faced in decades. Visit capstoneleadership.net and click on upcoming events. See you in June in Madison. there's going to be very little time, as we discovered, to focus on improvement initiatives and goal attainment. So making things better for the future. So narrowing the focus to three things, right? There's a diminishing return. The more goals we have, the less we'll accomplish. And the sweet spot for a middle manager is three things, maybe one, two, or three things to really focus on. And when we do that, we can focus on them in a big way, in a big, meaningful way. So again, we're maybe not decreasing workload or effort because we reduce the number of goals or improvement focuses from 27 to 3, but all of that workload and effort that we are putting in, even if it's equal, it's focused on a narrowly focused three top strategic priorities. There's a lot of clarity around that. There's a lot of alignment around that. There's a lot of understanding that these are the top three things to be improved upon, and that we set those goals on the higher end of difficulty, because there's science behind that too, right? When goals are on the higher end of difficulty, it causes us to get more creative. It causes us to, need to engage other people beyond ourselves. So it becomes a team effort. And there's just good science that our performance will elevate when our goals are on the higher end of difficulty. If it's too easy, we'll likely not be motivated to focus enough time on it, put enough effort in it. And then even then, easy goals might not be accomplished. I did a podcast episode on this, and I'm going to link that in the show notes about the upsides to setting very difficult goals, or goals on the higher end of difficulty, just shy of impossible. So we want to move miles towards the most important things, not millimeters towards many things. So that may take the same amount of workload or effort, right? But we're focused on fewer, most important things, highly aligned things versus many things. We're going miles towards those most important things versus making millimeters of progress towards many things, if at all. So changing how we work and changing the focus of our work, but maybe not necessarily our workload or our effort changing overall. If we work an 8-hour day now, we're going to work an 8-hour day then. But the workload is going to feel, and the effort is going to feel so different, because we're actually going to be achieving something. And as humans and as leaders, that feels really good. It feels meaningful, and it isn't frustrating. It isn't as stressful. It doesn't lead as much to turnover, because we are making a difference with whatever our workload is and whatever our effort is. So if you, as a leader, or maybe your entire leadership team, is thinking that this may be the answer to us, and I can tell you, it was the answer for me. It was the answer for all the leaders in my organization. It was part of how we transformed and turned around a very struggling organization. This was one of the main systems that we used, is changing our leadership approach, creating a new way of leading and a new way of focusing our leaders' efforts on fewer, higher priority things. And so if you're thinking that you need this for your leadership, if you're thinking that your leadership team, entire organization could benefit from a new way of leading, a new way of succeeding, we actually at Capstone have, since our inception in 2012, we have been teaching this leadership approach, not just to our partner organizations where we're engaged with them in total to work with them on all 4 systems, including this leadership system as part of their organization's transformation efforts. But if you as a leader want to learn this, we also teach our leadership bundle in a Capstone Leadership Summit. It is a signature event that we've been doing since 2012, and we hold it multiple times a year. This year, we're offering it once virtually and once in person. And the virtual one is actually as highly rated as the in-person one. And that usually isn't the case in my, experience, that virtual training is as satisfying and engaging and effective for leaders as in-person training. But that actually has been our experience in offering a virtual leadership summit. And we have done that in the past, and we hadn't done it in a while. And folks ask us to bring it back because, of course, that removes the barrier of travel and the cost of travel, which is important to some organizations, obviously, if there's financial constraints. So starting April 7th, we are starting our Capstone Leadership Summit, and it's going to be offered virtual across several weeks. So it's once a week for several weeks starting April 7th. And they're partial day sessions, and you'll be engaging with other leaders all around the country. We've got a nice roster of attendees already signed up, but it's not too late for you to sign up. To find out more, you can go to capstoneleadership.net. That's our website. I'll put the link in the show notes, and you can go to our resources page. And on that page, there's our upcoming events. We have 2 upcoming events, our virtual Capstone Leadership Summit, and for healthcare executives, our in-person healthcare executive forum is coming up in June. But what I really want to excite you about here today and get you interested in is attending the virtual Capstone Leadership Summit that starts April 7th. If you want to learn more, I'll put the links in the show notes, as I mentioned, or you can go to that website that I mentioned, or you can email info@capstoneleadership.net if you have any questions, or if you want us just send you the information via an email. So I think that for any leader right now that feels like they're ready to leave leadership, that they're on that higher end of stress and possible burnout, or maybe definitely, can call themselves burnt out in leadership, that if you're really thinking that the answer is, I need my workload reduced, I need to reduce my effort, I'd like to encourage you to learn a new, better way so that your workload and your effort are met with amazing results, pride, energy, excitement, and a renewed passion for this important work of leading healthcare and making things better for the future. It is such meaningful and rewarding work. I've given decades of my life to this work, and I have no regrets at all. And I think I too could have been one of those leaders that jumped ship, right? That left leading in healthcare because how hard I worked, how long I worked, how much I cared, and results just weren't moving until I learned and my peers around me learned a new way of working. And I worked long and hard and I cared a lot all the way through that, but it just felt different. It made me feel different as a healthcare leader when my effort was met with great outcomes. And that is the game changer. And it is possible for you, just like it was possible for me and all the other leaders that I've watched make this change and what it's done for their departments, their organizations, most importantly, what it's done for them as a human and as a human serving as a healthcare leader. So consider attending a Capstone Leadership Summit, and the next one is starting April 7th. Me and my team, we really look forward to seeing you there. Please consider joining us. Bye now.
Thanks for tuning in to Culture Change RX. If you found value in today's episode and you are a believer in fostering change in healthcare, join us in making a difference. Follow, rate, and review our podcast on your favorite platform. Share it with colleagues and your network. Together, we can make a lasting impact. Until next week, keep inspiring positive change.